Okay, we're down to the final two albums, but it is a familiar friend of the CTS universe.
Yeah, right.
One Mr. Neil Young, he not of Spotify, so I had to look on YouTube and other streaming platforms for this album, which allowed me to also watch the videos for these tracks, which I
Oh,
thought was
nice.
interesting. But yes, Neil Young and Crazy Horse, Ragged Glory. So, were you familiar with this album, Josh?
No, I was not. Obviously, we discussed Neil Young multiple times, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
I think we last covered them on a cold listen.
1979, I believe,
Yeah,
was the last time we covered. Yeah.
and there's a whole decade of the '80s that he kept making albums that we didn't
Correct.
listen to.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. This album makes me maybe want to go back and revisit them because, Josh, this album was really, really freaking good.
Yep,
Really good.
I
And
agree.
like, and I knew Neil Young leaned a little bit into like 90s grunge, right? Because we're going to cover Harvest Moon, and famously he was touring with Pearl Jam, and I'm familiar with that. I don't think I realized, though, that he was doing this in 1990. And this is right up there with my favorite Neil Young albums we've covered because the guitar work and the band is phenomenal on this album.
Yep.
There's not a bad track on this album, Josh, in my opinion. But what'd you think?
Oh, I am right there with you. I was kind of blown away by this album, and it was really refreshing to hear Neil Young again. I kind of forgot how his guitar sounds and kind of the way he gives space and kind of just rocks out. It was like so fun to listen to. And Crazy Horse, I don't want to give them short shrift. They really add a lot to this.
He even like sang better on this album. Like his
Yeah,
voice
I
was
agree.
even a little more. And I'm
Yeah.
like, where did this come from? Like,
Yeah, he
it's
sounds
still Neil
better.
Young, but it's like, wow, it's like a polished version of him.
Yep. And even the songs, there are two 10-minute tracks on this album that kind of finish off the first and second side for the most part. They didn't even feel like overwrought or kind of over done. I really liked him exploring the space. I feel like, the guitar solos they did, whatever the band did to help and accompany him really were enjoyable. And I felt like it was just like a fun, like jam session to get to listen to. There was an energy on this album that I really appreciated. It felt refreshing. It felt like he was having fun. Felt like the band was having fun. I really liked when they harmonized too. That always reminded me of Crosby, Stills, and Nash and Young when they would do that. That was really, I really appreciated that. And it's just, I don't know, his guitar just sounds so good on this. I think that's the main takeaway. And so yeah, I was really high on this album.
Well, they said this was a continuation of Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere, which is the last time we visited Neil Young in the
Which
late
I
70s.
really liked that album as well.
I did as well. And
Yeah.
then Zuma, which came a little bit after it, which we did not cover. Excuse me, I apologize. Did not come after. It was in the mid 70s, Zuma. But it was one of the albums we didn't cover in the 70s. But I mean, this is absolutely a grunge album. Like, this album is classic case grunge, like what the sound is. And it also is clearly designed to be played live. I know like he'd release a live album the next year
Yep.
that's off of it, but it's just such a vibrant, in many ways Neil Young and David Bowie, like they have all of this material that you're familiar with their big stuff, right? And you're familiar with their later stuff, the supposedly when they have these renaissances, right?
Yep.
But then they're having like these mini renaissances that don't even get like talked about, right? And this is a good example. Like, I'm like, oh, a Neil Young album. I wonder what he sounds like in 1990. And then I'm listening, I'm like, God damn, Neil Young sounds freaking incredible in
Yeah.
1990. In some ways, he might even sound better than a lot of the albums we covered in the 70s, which I loved,
Right.
which I was not like I wasn't expecting, but I should have expect because it's just. I was familiar with "Fucking Up" as a song, and I know I Pearl Jam covered it, and also I'm familiar, with that version of it as well. It's just an awesome song. I was familiar with "Country Home" as well, which is just a rollicking, good time, I'd say. And this is the purest form of rock and roll for me. It's just big guitars, tight, but it's both tight, but then it like the seams bust, and then he just plays loose. And then I love the juxtaposition between how tight they can be at times, but also how frayed it is at times. And like you said, there's these tracks that are 7, 8, 10 minutes long, and nothing feels 7, 8, or 10 minutes long about it,
Yep.
which is kind of the best thing you can say, because sometimes I am pretty vocal about that's enough, right?
Yep.
But I mean, he's 45 years old at this point. He sounds like he's in his mid 20s in terms of how he's playing, and the energy, right, is just a very youthful energy.
Yes.
Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy good.
The last, just for reference, the last album that we covered of his was "Tonight's the Night" on a Cold
Okay,
Listen
yep.
from 1975. That was, I believe, on bonus episode 8. So you can check that out. When we talked about that, I think we liked that. I
No,
remember.
we covered. I earlier. I just realized I misspoke. I said Everybody Knows This Is Nowhere is the album in the late 70s we covered, which is definitely not. That was one of the first albums we covered from Neil Young.
Yes.
So those listening and wanting to furiously put a comment in, I apologize. I misspoke on that one. I think the last album that we covered, actually, Josh, was Rust Never Sleeps in 1979.
Okay.
Yep, which was had My Hey Hey, and was a pretty rollicking rock out. Cortez the Kennedys on there, Cortez the Killer, excuse me, and stuff like that. So it's just, I think, right. I'm trying to go. No.
Oh, we covered on the beach as well.
On the beach as well. Yeah, I was about to say
you're
we
right.
covered definitely a few after 75, Josh.
Yeah,
so,
Rust Never Sleeps was actually the last episode of the 70s that we
Correct.
Did.
Had like Pocahontas was on that one, I believe, and yeah. It's got. I mean, all Neil Young. We haven't had a misfire yet. Now I know there's ones where he sort of took it in a different direction, trying to get out of his record label and stuff, and you know we didn't cover some of those. But this is just another one, and just vibrant music, and just a real surprise. If you had told me that, you know, in 1990 my favorite album, we're gonna cover a bunch of them, might be a Neil Young album, like I said before, I'd both be surprised and not surprised at the same time. So
Yep. Yeah, we should add to the first 2 tracks, Country Home and White Line, were songs that they had wrote and performed in the 70s, but they re-released on this album. And even the the album cover kind of reminds me of like a grunge album cover, or something that the 90s would
the
use,
writing,
the fisheye and
the scrawled writing with Neil Young, Crazy Horse, and the Ragged. Yeah, it's like I said, it's amazing how Neil Young is both like himself and doesn't change at all for the decade he's in. He's sort of a timeless presence, but yet somehow fits in every freaking decade at the same time. He's like a man of every decade. And maybe that's the gift, right? Like if you don't feel like you're trying too hard, you can transcend your decade.
Yeah, it makes me Neil Young came to Oregon earlier this summer here, and I wish I had seen him, because it probably would have been a really good show.
Yeah, I mean, to this day, you get the feeling that he still will bring a certain
Vital.
energy.
Yep.
But this one's real strong thumbs up for me. It was just an album that put me in a good mood. It was good both blasting without headphones and in headphones. It was just as good in either format. It's a great car album. Yep. Like if you're driving, it's a great album to have. It would be a great album to have on like in a space when you're relaxing, kind of. I'm not gonna say like a barbecue, but just something where you're with a couple friends and just blasting loud music. It fills that niche too, in a way that like classic rock does. It's, even though it's a grunge album. So
it's my album of the week, of all the ones we're discussing. It was both a surprise and a pleasure to and comforting in a way that Neil Young still was making great music.
Yeah, and it also makes me want to, when we're going to do like bonus sessions of stuff, it always is going to make me want to look to see what Neil Young was doing at that time and see if I can bring it in, because he just continues to deliver for us along the way. So
yeah, I'll be curious to, I'm sure Matt will agree, but I want to know what his thoughts are on this
Oh
album.
God, Matt's gonna love this album. Are you
Yeah.
kidding? This is like pure heroin for like our sound, like just pure grunge. He loves like jam rock, and so this is jamming out. Like, I'd be absolutely stunned if he didn't love this album. Would be
Yeah.
my guess.
I'm just
But
wondering if he's familiar with it already, or if he.
that's a good question.
That's mainly what I'm interested in.
I know he'll be familiar with Harvest Moon for
Yeah.
sure because he's referenced it and it was very much in the culture. But like I said, I had no idea that Neil Young was still making albums right before that. I bought into the idea that like, oh, look at Neil Young was brought along with Pearl Jam and revitalized. Nope.
Yeah.
He was already plenty vitalized before that. So
Yeah, and Harvest Moon comes out in '92, and I think we
Correct.
might be covering that.
we are. Yep,
Looks
we are.
like so. Yeah, stay tuned for that as well.
Yeah, it was a well-regarded album and it was a pretty big album too. So
Got it.
and I mean, it's not hard to hear Pearl Jam in this album. There's a lot of overlap, especially when Pearl Jam plays live. So
Yeah, true. They play together too, right? At like the
that's what Harvest Moon is. They make an album. I think it's called Mirror Ball, if I remember correctly, which is the synthesis of Neil Young and Pearl Jam. Let me just do a quick cleaning of the stacks
Yep,
now.
you're right.
Mirror Ball, yeah.
He uses Pearl Jam, like Crazy Horse, in his like as a backup band or as the band. It seems like based on this all music description.
I know around this time also he's like Sonic Youth is opening for him and
Oh, wow.
he deeply loves Sonic Youth as he's doing it and like it influences him quite a bit. He actually at some point does something called ARC is the name ARC
Okay.
is the name of it. It's an album by Neil Young and Crazy Horse after this one that's released in October 1991. And it's basically 35 minutes of feedback and distortion
Oh my God.
with basically Thurston Moore's suggestions like built in. And he looked at them almost as like collaborators. So I will probably love it. You guys would probably hate it. But like at the same time, that's also who's sort of revolving around. But at this time, to give you an idea who's opening for him, he's got like Social D, Social Distortion, and Sonic Youth running support for him, which makes a lot of sense. But he's also like bringing in like Linda Ronstadt and James Taylor to help him out and stuff. So, and Pearl Jam is just, he's an interesting, he's just kind of always of the culture, he's just
He's really, I think he crosses generations in terms of his appeal and his.
And the year before
interests.
this, he was doing like "Rockin' in the Free World," right?
Yeah.
Which is like a pretty famous song as well. That's not on this one, but that's also in this era of stuff he's playing. So
Crazy.